Magic recently announced the bracket system. It's a way of cataloging the power levels and playstyles of commander decks. This works as a replacement to how players used to do it, where they'd rank their deck's power on a scale of 1 to 10. Without tangible values actually connected to these numbers, this would often lead players to just calling their deck a 7. But what's a 7 for you might not be a 7 for me. This bracket system introduces actual philosophies for each step along the way. Hi, I'm Harrison, I run these here parts. I've been playing Magic so long that I got into the game as a high school student, and now I'm a high school teacher. And one skill I've developed in teaching is processing information and making it easier for others to digest. This is the bracket system explained. I'm going to start at the bottom and go to the top. But before I get started, I want to make clear that I am talking about the bracket while they're still in the beta phase. So things may change when the development team receives enough feedback, but I imagine this list will largely remain the same besides a few exceptions. Let's start with bracket 1. It's been given the name Exhibition. The quick and dirty is this is ultra casual, with no intentional 2-card infinite combos, no overtly busted cards, and no annoying game mechanics like mass land removal and extra turns. When it comes to overtly busted cards, that can kind of be subjective, so Magic has released a list of cards that they've called game changers. I imagine this is the part of the bracket that will see the most change when it comes to updates. I think a safe way of looking at the game changer cards is that this is a list of cards that they probably would ban, but there's just too many of them, and it's a casual format, so this is their solution. In bracket 1, you are however permitted to bring some tutors. This might step up the power level of your deck, but if your deck's whole purpose is being silly, then you're only really greasing the wheels to make your play experience more silly. You're not really trying to win here, but instead you're trying to have a good time. This is a great place for randomly themed decks. If you want to build a deck that is men screaming, women wearing hats, or people in chairs, this is the tier for it. It'd also be the perfect tier to try out commander decks built around creature types that have no reason to have commander decks built around them. Always want to try out a jellyfish deck? Think brushwags are hilarious in the story? This is a great spot for it. I am going to make a running analogy throughout this video equating each bracket to sports, specifically basketball. Bracket 1 is you and your buddies just getting a basketball and messing around. You might try some silly things you saw in the Harlem Globetrotters, you're definitely trying some full course shots, but ultimately you're not really trying to win the game, you're just trying to have fun. That is the most important takeaway from Exhibition. So going up to bracket 2 is the title of Core. Ultimately, I believe this is where the bulk of commander decks could fall, unless you're spending several hundreds of dollars on upgrades and running some really degenerate synergies. Magic titles this as the average current pre-constructed deck. Just like the first bracket, you can't include mass land removal, 2-card infinite combos, or anything overly busted from the Game Changers list, but you're still allowed to run a few tutors here to grease the wheels. Unlike the first bracket, you can include cards that take extra turns, but it phrases it specifically as not chaining extra turns. So if you want to play a card that could give you an extra turn here or there, that's fine, but if you want to play a card that can reliably give you several extra turns, especially really close to each other, that belongs to higher brackets. Decks that belong in bracket 2 are more cohesive than bracket 1. They have a strategy that they're built around and they're here to win, where bracket 1 was solely based around the experience and just having a good time. Bracket 2 wants that, but would also like to win. You aren't playing anything too busted in a deck like this, but this is the home to the classic commander board state of having an army of creatures and bashing them into your opponent. They try to use the tangible threshold here of an average pre-constructed deck. You're probably not winning before turn 10 with a deck like this, but it also doesn't have to mean that this is exclusive to pre-constructed decks. Lord knows that I've built plenty of commander decks in my time that would be vaguely as powerful as a pre-constructed deck you could buy at your LGS. As for my sports analogy, I'd say bracket 2 is more like a game of pickup basketball. If Exhibition is messing around and maybe playing a game of horse with friends and trying to nail full court shots, bracket 2 is a group of people at a local court who are trying to get some cardio in and having fun. You know the rules and some strategies, but no one's going to go too hard. But everyone should at least be trying to win. This is the perfect tier to describe as it's just a game. You should want to win, but don't get too stressed about it. Up to bracket 3. They've titled this one as Upgraded. These are a clear step up from the pre-constructed decks of bracket 2. We're not doing any mass land removal or chaining extra turns, but if a game goes long enough, it's okay to pull out that 2-card combo. This is a well-constructed engine. This is more than just a theme. This deck has a plan and is put together in a way to get to that plan. A great way to move a bracket 2 deck to a bracket 3 deck is play that bracket 2 deck a couple times, figure out what works well and what doesn't, and cut that stuff that doesn't. Now bracket 3 isn't cutthroat by any means. It's much like the previous 2 brackets where you're primarily here to do something cool and have fun. It just so happens that this deck's definition of fun is somewhat powerful magic, and it has a way of getting there. This means while it may do some powerful things, this is also a great spot for some jank. If you have some cards that you love to play but aren't necessarily the best, they can still make it into the deck here. And talking about powerful things, this is the part where Magic starts accepting the use of game changers. The official infographic says 3 game changers, but as with most things in Magic, this is not a hard and fast rule. If you're playing a well-tuned mono red deck and you don't want to run Underworld Breach, you can still be plenty strong enough to be in bracket 3 but also not be too busted. This bracket wants a game of fair Magic. No punching below the belt with land removal, and no trying to end the game with broken combos. It wants fair Magic. It wants to play creatures, play spells, have some interaction, and be rewarded for having a decent synergy going. To my sports metaphor, Bracket 1 was goofing around with a group of friends, Bracket 2 is a pickup game of basketball, Bracket 3 is a fully organized game. Whether it's a beer league or a league at your local rec center, this is a formally organized game, potentially with regular season and playoffs. These decks are built to win, and while they might not do everything optimized, it wants to have some semblance of a proper team. These decks are designed for games to end. It might just not look nearly as pretty as watching a professional do it. Up to Bracket 4, this is titled Optimized. The gloves are off. There are no restrictions. You can play everything but the ban list. Everyone at the table is playing decks that have been tuned up to be as powerful as they can be. You are not limiting yourself in any way, and you may do some cutthroat maneuvers. If you want to blow up lands, that's totally okay. If you want to knock someone out before they can even play their commander, that's fine too. You're trying to win. You've went out of your way to find a commander deck that is powerful and found powerful synergies and themes to use within this deck, and you're more than willing to play a game against 3 others who are also building powerful decks and are willing to step on toes to get ahead. The sports analogy here is that of a college basketball team. The players here were scouted and picked from some of the best talent available to form a great team. Everyone is playing their hearts out, and this is where we start to slip away from the "it's just a game" idea. It's no longer just a game. It's just a game when I'm spending $50 on it and have some casual drinks with friends while playing. This is full-blown, I am trying to win and will spend extra time, money, and effort to win. It's not enough just to have fun playing the game. I need to be winning more than that average 25%. Which then brings us up to Bracket 5, which is cedh, the lone bracket that fully predates this bracket system. Someone described it as an entirely different format, and while this is a conversation for those better versed in cedh, I can see how people form that idea. Cedh is competitive Elder Dragon Highlander. Competitive being the big thing here. Everything before this was various levels of casual Magic. This is straight up competition. There's a lot of overlap between the high-powered Magic previously mentioned and cedh. These are still some of the most powerful Magic decks. The big thing that separates cedh from the previous brackets is the meta. It's no longer enough to make your deck as strong as possible. You have to take into consideration what everyone else is running. When the previous bracket was blindly bringing whatever high-power commander decks to the table, cedh takes it a step further and scouts and prepares. It knows the most powerful decks that are currently running around in cedh, and either tries to build something similar, or tries to build something that can counter that meta. cedh researches the meta, it scouts out what new tech is coming up from newer sets, and tests different play patterns and builds. If Bracket 4 was college basketball, this is the full-on NBA. You are scouting your competition and relying on similar strategies to get ahead. So that was my Magic bracket system explained. Let me know in the comments what you think of this new bracket system. I think it's pretty nifty, but I do see a lot of my fellow content creators getting angry over it. I'm not going to name names, but some of these people just like being angry sometimes. If you're still here, thank you. Here's a video of mine that YouTube thinks you'll really like. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to bolt your birds.